Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, editor of TappingQA.com. What you are about to see is a conversation that I had with Gunilla and Ulf, who run the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network provides tapping resources to individuals all over the world, to refugees, to migrants, to prisoners, to the underprivileged. They have touched the lives of people in over 30 countries and have worked with hundreds of thousands of individuals. If, as you watch this conversation, you are touched, you are inspired, you are moved, what I would encourage you to do is support the amazing work that they are doing. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support, and you can support their amazing work. And if you look down below this video in the description and the first comment, you will see a link that you can go to provide that support. I hope you enjoy this conversation. I think the first useful question would be, how did all of this get started? How did you get connected into this work? Where is your heart in this? Kind of what is the history that has led us to this particular moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good and not super easy to. Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's easy to because it is like we are both two people who have been engaged in different questions, like, I mean, what you call it, human rights, children's rights, since a long time. I worked on a big project called the World's Children's Rights of the Child for many years, met a lot of traumatized children from the ways that their rights had been abused, and thinking there's something you can do, not just talk to them and get their stories. And so that's a bit how it actually the part of it started for me. And you, Ulf, what to say?
I mean, for me, it was I came from entertainment and interest in psychology, and I stumbled into hypnosis and started using it on stage and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And from there, I started looking into therapy, and I found it fascinating. I found music to be therapy for many, and therapy to be a concert for one or a group. So I was looking for some way to resolve anxiety, trauma, stress, and all these things that would travel beyond the language and linguistics of NLP and hypnosis. So I found a blog of Gunilla, and I was fascinated by the fact that she was traveling around helping people post-genocide in Rwanda with trauma and stress and anxiety without actually doing any talking, or a very small amount of talking if even necessary. And that completely had me spellbound. So I sent an email and we met up, and well, there's a long and happy and funny story about that we can do some other time. But basically, we met up, and I was fascinated by how quickly it worked. It really worked, and I could recognize the trance state of hypnosis and everything. So we started working together from there on.
And so, Gunilla, how did you find your way in East Africa in the middle of all of that? That's not something that someone just kind of wanders into the middle of a country recovering from a genocide. Like, how did you find yourself in that particular setting?
I mean, in a way, it is like I have been a journalist and I mean, international activist since many years. I have been to many places. And through the project that I mentioned, I have met the contact network all over the world. And so after realizing that really with this, as a journalist, which is my first career, you easily traumatize somebody who tells the story in depth for you with details, you know, what did it look like, what time of the day, what did you wear, how did you feel, what had you eaten? I mean, all those senses that are activated through your questions to write a great story can easily re-traumatize somebody. And it was through that. So I had been to many places. And when I finally found tapping, or the version called TFT, then thought field therapy, it was like, wow, Eureka, you know, this is it. This is what I and others can use in those kind of situations also. And I can say many journalists and photographers have said after they read, I mean, what we have written, what I wrote about my own personal story, said that, wow, yeah, I can really recognize that you know, you feel that you are opening a wound and then you leave, you know, the person with that wound. But moving around in Africa was that being invited by people I knew through this project, and together then, of course, from the beginning with Dr. Carl Johnson, our, you know, hero and mentor, who is long time trauma expert and TFT specialist, but then was in his background having all other kind of techniques, but finding tapping the way that his client, being then war veterans, mainly in the US, in the state of Virginia, at the VA hospital, finally they healed from all their symptoms. And that's how he got involved. He didn't really like it, actually. But then I wrote this article because he was one of the 5 who wrote the first recognized article about the effects and the results of using tapping in the aftermath of the war on the Balkans in Kosovo. And so this is when reading that article, for me, I felt like, wow, this is really the steps I want to follow, because I had all these contacts internationally and then helping out in places where a lot of things have happened, but few resources to assist in psychological matters. I mean, I thought at that time that Sweden had, we didn't need it here, but we have understood otherwise lately.
Right.
Later on.
So then in that process, I mean, one of the, getting a chance to travel with you all this past January and seeing the work firsthand in both Uganda and Rwanda, one of the things that both my sister and I came away really impressed with was the way that you're showing up to resource the leaders in a local community, and you're not someone from the outside who's coming in to fix something. Was that by design from the beginning? Was that something you stumbled into? Was that just a response that you recognized as a journalist traveling the world for so long as an outsider, that was the best way in? Like, what was I see that as just one of the brilliance of the work that you're doing. How did you find your way to operating in that particular way?
I think you're right. It is, I mean, when you're a journalist, you have to get point that the person feels you're listening, and being there. Then of course I think it is of personal experience and some I would say it's like street smart, in that way, of cultural smart way of getting used to it, just like Ulf, who spent a lot of his time in different countries. I did the same, and always was so interested in listening to people, and that's why I became a journalist, because I was so curious about everything, and curious specifically about listening to people's stories. Or what would you say, Ulf? I mean, the way that we are doing.
Yeah, I would say that it's partly street smart, but it's also common sense. I mean, who's the expert on what they need, what's culturally appropriate? Who is the expert knowing who needs help more and how? Well, it's them. So, I mean, the people who will be wanting to have a method are the people who are already the community leaders. They're already helping people, and people have trust in them. To try to take another route would be immensely uncommon sense. And also, in a way, some people have asked us lately, because they read about you when you joined us with your assistant, say, oh wow, I would love to join the Peaceful Heart somewhere. And during all years, as we told you, we've never really done this, but I had a chance because I just did a conference for Havening where we talked about the learnings from humanitarian work with tapping and Havening, and it just fell upon me that the way we're working is you don't join the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network joins you where you are, where you need to do something. And that's how we've been working. We help people, local leaders, or people who want to be, to create change, big or small.
And I actually, I don't want to gloss over what you said there, that you're saying, oh, it's just common sense. And I would disagree with that particular thing, that it is common sense, because as a skilled practitioner, we go in to solve problems. So much so, like I have a little pre-flight checklist that I look at before every single one of my client sessions to remind me to be present. And number 2 on here, it says, ask one more question. Because I know as a skilled practitioner, as a problem solver, when I get a particular piece of information from a client, it's like, ooh, let's go after this thing. This is the way we want to go. And I know that if I stop and I ask one more question, like you said, they are an expert on their particular experience. And oftentimes that one extra question gets us not one level deeper, but 3 or 4 levels deeper. And I would consider myself a thoughtful, skilled practitioner. And that's something I have to re-remind myself of before every single session, permission to not be super excited about solving the problem, not being super excited about being the helper, but listening. And so the fact that you are saying that this is common sense, I think you are understating, like, I think we could agree that that is true, but for those of us that are helpers, I think it's hard for us to do that. And so the fact that you do that so consistently is just something that I admire so much about the work. And so I want to underline that for all of us who are helpers in the world, to what you've just said. The person we are talking to is the expert in their experience, and we can be guides inside of that. But the slowness is something I think is so valuable in the way that you approach what you're doing.
But perhaps it also is my background as a journalist, because as a journalist, you never solve the problems to anybody. You listen because you want your story. You ask questions. I mean, for me, like this, have a question posed to me is a very, it is, I had to get used to it. I'm so used to turning the conversation and start asking you instead. It is because has been my job.
And as you're saying that, when you were giving your history on your journalism, and I knew about your history because we've known each other, but in this time when you were explaining it, the thought inside of my head was, because you are a journalist first, it actually equips you really, really well to do this, because as a journalist, you're just gathering information, and it's possible for a journalist to have an agenda when they're going in to write a very particular story, but even beyond, but still, it's just asking information. And like, that's such amazing training to being a helper, versus those of us who are starting from a place of, how do I be a helper, which implies I'm doing something, where starting as a journalist, I'm showing up going, okay, how can I understand? And that's such a valuable skill for us to have when we're doing any sort of helping work with tapping or otherwise. And I just think that's such a valuable thing for us to be highlighting as we're thinking about this particular work.
Yeah, and I never really thought about it the way that you're posing it now. It was through answering this question that I thought, yeah, probably that is, because it is really, this listening stuff that has been my job. It is like I'm noting down, not saying, oh, you should do like this or that. Or when you went, oh, you should do like this and that. No, that's not the case.
And so in the time that you've been doing this work, I would love to hear just like 2 or 3 lessons that you have learned in the work that impacts the work going forward, impacts the way you do your own work. Just like those moments where you're in the midst of something where you're showing up as a helper, and all of a sudden it's just like, oh my gosh, this is something that is useful in all of these other ways, to the ways that we approach folks.
So many of our, I would say the basics of the work has come from Dr. Carl Johnson. Which are, things that he said during the first trips to Rwanda that I made with him, and that we have developed. And one is related to what you just asked about, this about listening and taking the story. It is also this, that you don't need to have the full story. So that actually goes to the other way, saying that no more suffering. That was his expression. We, especially since we have specialized in trauma, that's important to know also when looking at our work. It's not anything, but we have, and that's why our technique is called trauma tapping technique. And he was also a specialist in trauma, and saying those who are traumatized have suffered enough. Asking the full story can re-traumatize anybody, So that's why this so that was one of the things, and that is really the basis. So we could say that, when you work with people who have been through war, genocide, or being a refugee, many have their trauma active 24/7. You don't need to ask anything, because the tapping does the work, because you're connected already to what there is.
I'd like to add something to that, because we had this discussion just a while ago. We were discussing different aspects of this. And when we're saying we're specialists in trauma, we're saying we're specialists in teaching anybody, a layman, to handle trauma, because it's not us. You don't need to be a specialist to handle trauma, even if we're specialized in that area, because tools like tapping and all the other tools and modalities like havening and other tools of energy psychology, they've changed the world of healthcare, because people can help themselves and others in a safe way if it's done in the simplest form without side effects. And this is a revolution of democracy, There's no need to get in line for expert help, which in Sweden could be 20 months. And in some places we go, there won't be ever. Just to create a safe baseline and regain homeostasis, a base level of dignity. That's nothing can be more democratic than a technique that allows any child, woman, and man to regain control of their emotions and cognition after facing possible traumas. So when we say we specialize in trauma, we specialize in making trauma simple for everybody and safe.
And and like one of the ways that we got a chance to see that firsthand was when we were in the prison in Rwanda. We were there the day that 101 inmates, males and females, had received their TTT certificates, and they were just so excited and happy. But it was amazing to hear that the community of inmates that were learning the tool had committed to each of them teaching 10 other inmates the tool. And so the 101 of them had impacted another 1,000 of them, and that they actually had tents in the facility where they held office hours for the other inmates, and they had extra copies of the books and things like that. And so like the rippling effect of something like that inside of a community, where it's not only that you're equipping someone with a tool, but because it is a simple wordless technique that does not require re-traumatizing the person, does not require asking delicate questions, allows that to be this domino effect that is just passing along and passing along and passing along and amplifying in that particular way, which I think is just such an elegant part of the process, is because it's something that can be done in a trauma safe way around complex trauma, but like allows mass people to be able to have access to it. It's just such a beautiful part of the work.
Yeah, and that is one of those the foundation of our work. It is exactly that. It is the multiplying effect. I mean, to make see to that people don't put the teachings in a drawer or just a diploma in your wall or wherever you put it, or forget about it, because we always say it's too valuable, and it is for free. I mean, we give so many trainings for free. Also, I mean, in the Western world, I mean, it doesn't matter where, anybody can learn these techniques that we value so much, and this is the way of spreading it, because for us, we see this world, if this were something, it is stress relief. I mean, goodness. So it doesn't matter really where you are, actually, but everybody needs stress relief. So then if we can do something about that, like with the help of you and your sister, it's fantastic to amplify it even more, to make people see that, okay, I can share some of this also, even if I'm a professional, but I can share also. So that is, I mean, this of saying this, like Ulf was referring to, that don't join Peaceful Heart where we are, but we will join you where you are. And of course, it doesn't have to be physically, it can be just by mentoring, and that's what we have done also after discussions with Eugene. I mean, having this mentoring where people can come and get inspired to do, and we always say, do something close to you. There is probably some community where you know somebody, because that's also one of the important things in our work. It is, we never come just spontaneously. We're always invited where we come. So there's somebody who trusts us already, somebody who knows what to do.
And that's one of the things that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about over the course of the next 24 hours between the various conversations, is how people can access this, but also how they can be advocates and share it in their community in small ways. Because I think one thing that's also really important is like on some level, it's really awesome to think about going to these super, super marginalized communities where there is true deep trauma in the world. And one of the things that my buddy Rick Wilkes, who we're going to be talking to later today as part of this process, taught me this really wonderful term. He calls it vibrational leadership. And the way that we show up and just our presence is a leader around the people who are around us. And when we take a tool like this and we share it inside of our family, if we share it inside of our local community, it is not on the front line of a war. It is not in a country where there are refugees and genocide, but it is something that is impacting the world as a whole, because we're making our little pocket of the world a healthier, more regulated place. And so as we have these conversations, it's wonderful that we can support work in those far-flung places, and we are on the front line of humanity. every single one of us. And it's an opportunity for us to be advocates in that particular way. And so like, it's great to laud people who are running all over the world doing really amazing things, but all of us have an opportunity to be that sort of vibrational leader and transformative by just sharing a tool like this with one other person. It doesn't have to be a class of 35 people. It doesn't have to be something that's online. It can be over a cup of coffee with a friend who's having a hard day. And all of a sudden, that little bitty rippling effect of helping them helps all of us in the work and the way that we navigate the world. And so I think it's important that we're like shining a light on, this isn't just something for the fringes and the deeply traumatized with complex trauma. This is something we all have access to, and it benefits it all when we do those sorts of things.
So much. I mean, completely agree on that. And that is the important. And always, we always say also, you have no idea. I mean, the ripple effects around that one person, like you say, how that spreads. I mean, it can be 10 years later, you meet somebody like I did this other day. I mean, somebody who came to my garden to have a training in tapping, later meet her in a secondhand shop in my town. And she says, Gunilla, is that you? You know, she's a nurse in the emergency ward, what do you call it? In the next city. And she's been using this tapping ever since. I mean, that's 10 years. I had no idea. I mean, she came to my garden. It was a nice, the apple blossoms were there and, and sharing it like that. But she took it the whole way, to people who got into panic after waking up after operation and, in the ward where they were also panicking for different, or being very stressed or afraid, before an operation or surgery. So, I mean, it is like that. And I think, isn't it, we meet people like this all the time who we have no idea what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that some of our best stories are stories of people who learned it between two subway stops and then helped it, like thousands of widows in Afghanistan, like Salima. And the reason we teach this simple is because when you keep it simple, the risk of doing harm is very little. Kristen Miller, psychologist in California, helping people in the forest fire, she said that one thing we contributed was to get therapy out of the head, get the therapy room out of it, and give first aid. And one of the reasons often given by people who don't attempt first aid in emergency situations is lack of confidence and a fear of doing more harm than good. But I mean, there's a Norwegian study that shows that even 4 or 5-year-old children are able to learn and perform basic first aid. So here's a picture that I have borrowed from the New York Times as a quote. I'm not sure if we can show this or not, but you can find out. But here is what we can learn from a virus that recently graced the earth, the surface of it. And here we see that, one people is contagious and gives it to one other person, and then thousands of people may be affected down the line. Well, if you learn from this in a positive way, you could say that by not teaching it to one person, you are actually causing maybe thousands of people to not get this first aid. So there's no reason not to teach it and spread it, because it's free and it can do no harm and it can save lives.
And the other thing I think is really important when we're thinking about sharing it is, I have gotten to the point when I'm sharing any version of tapping with someone else, is that when they say no and they are not interested in that, what I do is I file it away as they're one more person closer to saying yes. Because it's something that is like slowly permeating the culture. I've been professionally doing this for 15 years. And when I first moved to New York 10 years ago, when I would be on a first date and someone would ask me what I did for a living, like there was this long conversation about this tappy thing. In the last 6 months, I went on 3 different first dates in which I said, I do this tapping thing. Like, oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I've learned that particular thing. And so because it is out there more and more, if I offer it to someone and they say no, more than likely there's someone else in their life sometime in the future that's going to introduce it to them. And what I've done is I've just given them one more, I've heard of that thing before. I keep hearing about that thing. I really need to tune into that particular thing. And so I think the other thing that's really important as we are sharers of a tool set like this is, like, it's important that I don't have an emotional attachment to the person that I'm offering it to, that they say yes to that particular thing, but just offer it with a sense of charity, offer it with a sense of hopefulness for them. And if they say no, that's a choice, but I also might be getting them one step closer to eventually saying yes to it, because someone else is going to share it to them down the line, because we're seeing it more and more and more as we kind of navigate the world in this way.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. We should have had it. We had the training before for social workers in Sweden, and some of them had met some resistance, and that's a very good. I mean, it is a very good answer, because that's how it is. For me, it was like that.
Yeah.
It was the second person who told me, "What did you know about this tapping stuff? You should learn it." Auditors since before, they thought this should go for you. And then the first time I thought, oh, sounds really, what do you call it, wacky or something strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wacky's the word.
Yeah, and then the second time somebody else said it, I thought, shit, this must be just like you say. I probably something. If I heard this now twice within 3 months, it must be something, And here I am.
Yeah, be one of those 3 times.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, go ahead, Ulf.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention also what you said, because there's so many. We've had these discussions when we were traveling together, and we really enjoyed talking to you, Gene, because you have a unique and good, very experienced perspective on things. And it's like what you said about not investing in people actually receiving it. I mean, if you give a gift, if it's unconditional, if it's love, it's unconditional. If it's unconditional, you're not invested in outcome. But this goes also for the help we're giving, like getting out of the therapy room. We don't assume anything. We don't assume that we're going to fix anybody. We don't assume that they're going to get well. We don't assume that going down from 9 to 8 as an SUD is good or bad. We simply ask them. And we don't assume that a person who has been abused, violated, or had violence in some form doesn't want to be touched or anything like that. We simply ask, we don't assume, and then we ask again. And then we give them a tool that they can continue to work with on their own. And by not investing in an outcome or people accepting it or us being the helper, we actually do what we can. We give them something that might help them.
And I love the fact that you're saying ask. Like I recently in my email newsletter mentioned something that I was doing. I'm working with a healthcare professional. We made some decisions about what I'm doing. And I just mentioned, hey, this is what's going on in my life, blah, 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 blah. And I received 3 emails from readers who told me I was doing it wrong and saying, oh, this is dangerous because of blah, 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 blah. And like, I didn't ask. Like like sarcastically, I wanted to go, well, I wanted to reply and go, I will tell my doctor that you disagree with the advice that he's giving me. And I held back on doing that. But I think asking is the really important thing. And so when we have a tool, I think it's really important to say, I understand that you are experiencing stress right now. I have something that might be helpful for you. Are you interested in hearing about it? And so I think that like by this idea that you're talking about, Ulf, about asking, I think it's so much more valuable because I know, like, one, I don't want to be running someone over. Like, I know at the beginning of my tapping career, I talked more people out of tapping than talking them into tapping, just in my zealousness. And this is so exciting. Oh my gosh, you have to blah, blah. And I just shared way too much. And they were just kind of like slowly backing away. Please stop talking to me, crazy man. But getting to the other side of that and being in a circumstance of like any help that we're offering, saying, can I help? Can I offer this thing for you? Gives them agency, gives them control. And like, I am perceived differently if I show up, if I'm asking a question versus showing up and helping. And the way that I approach might determine whether or not you're willing to accept where I'm coming from. And I think it's hard for us, again, like I mentioned, ask one more question as a helper. Like, we are so keenly and acutely aware of the pain of the people around us. And for those of us who have had exposure to tools, know what it's like to be on the other side of that pain and know how simply it is that we just want to create that transformation. But like, we're responsible to, we're not responsible for the people around us. And making sure that we're asking, I think, is such a vital thing, even as simple as, hey, can I teach you something? And then if they say no, being okay with that because it's their life and we need to respect that particular boundary. But like, I'm like, so affirmative consent is the vocabulary that's been floating around in the last 5 or 6 years as we're talking about relationships and how we interact with people and just being in a place of not just like assuming consent, but actually getting consent from the person. Can I share something with you? Not only Are we more likely to have a yes? They're going to be actively listening because they're inviting us in. And I'm much more likely to receive something that I have invited in than someone giving to me in that particular way. And that question, Ulf, just asking, is the powerful way that allows us to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and it actually goes also that with we wrote the manifesto one time. So, and it says offer, don't insist. I mean, and that is because I had the same experience when I learned. I wanted, well, exactly like you say, you see somebody having something and you have a solution. It's like very difficult not to jump on. And that was also Dr. Johnson. He was very much, offering and backing off, constantly. So that is, and that's so important. So it is something we have, but never impose, and he would say also the person is always the boss. So it is we do as he or she or what is there to accept, So,
and I think the other part that's really important about that is that from a helper from the outside where we see a problem, I think one of the mistakes that we're making is we're assuming we understand the context of the suffering that the person is going through. And we're not inside of their experience. And those of us who are like, as a skilled practitioner who's worked with thousands of clients, I've gotten a lot better at anticipating the context. And there's not a week that goes by with my clients that I'm not surprised by a piece of context where we're doing something and I think we're going in a particular direction and I ask a question and I get an answer and it's like, oh, okay, this is something completely different than what I assumed it was. Awesome. I'm glad I have that piece of information. Now let's be helpful in a different way. And so that sense of curiosity is just so valuable in being a helper in any regard, regardless of the tool set that we're using.
Yeah. So perhaps we show the way that we do tapping, since it is.
Yes, please. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Since it is, I mean, most tapping modalities use more or less the same points. And we use more or less the same points like others. And then we always get the question, why don't you use this one or this one? But then we can say from the beginning, we have this setup. It comes more perhaps from the TFT version of points to be tapped, and also by SET, in I think he's also here in this.
Steve Wells is a part of the work. Yep. Steve's part of this weekend as well.
Now,
thank you, Steve.
Intuitive energy. I mean, his late learned or read about was the SET. Anyway, it is using. So these are the points we use. These are the points that we have made millions of pages of material, links, app and everything. So that's why we use these points. So when we do tapping, we would ask a person then to sit up with your spine comfortably erect, because you need all your nerve ends to go out from your spine, so not sitting hunching or, in your sofa.
And I'm going to stop you just for a second. Everybody who is watching along with us, this is not instruction. This is demonstration that we're participating in. So everybody tap along with us.
Okay. Yeah. So it is like tapping along with the way that we do this TTT, trauma tapping technique. So we just start on the side of the hand. Like so many others, we usually say it in our instruction materials, it says 10 to 15 times. Our blob, the Winky in our app, does it starting with this karate chop. And then we do this that Donna Eden calls crown pull, which is prefrontal cortex massage to get a bit of this activated, since it's kind of offline when we are stressed and traumatized. And it also stretches the wrinkles a bit. It feels nice. Okay. And then we tap above the nose.
And here some will ask if we're using setup or affirmations or phrases and things. And our instruction is really, really short. It's just, if we say anything, it is connect ever so lightly with whatever bothers you. And that's it.
That's all needed. And with one hand on the nose.
You can give it an SUD if you want.
And don't forget to breathe.
It's a good thing to breathe.
Yeah.
Prolongs life.
And then the chest, we do a tapping all over the chest. Not only in the the point indicated, which would be here, the K27, but we do it all over because the chest has so many different points under the.
So many tapping points. Yes,
So
I'm
many tapping
always going across here. This
the
is,
leg fields, you have the thymus behind your breastbone, and so tapping a bit like this is very good. And then we take one hand on the opposite shoulder and then tap our razor. So of course straight over. Most of you know this, but I'll just show it so that since we do it a bit differently, some.
And the reason for the hand is if you're doing it on somebody else and you put the hand there, it's going to be a lot safer for them to receive the tapping under the arm.
Yeah. So, and then we go to the fingers. So we tap on all fingers. So starting with the little finger.
Side of the nail at the very end. And then the thumb at the end.
And then we do once again on chest, since you all know that this part, as Gina said, it has so many points. So we often say that if you forget all the other points, at least remember the chest, because it can help so much. I mean, for many, they would say that, wow, this is really where I feel a great change. And tapping a small child.
Whenever I go here, like I just immediately have goosebumps and chills go up my spine, like, and not even tuning into anything, just going here, just the entire system just, comes alive.
We say this is a standalone tapping method we call gorilla tapping as well, just doing this in box breathing.
Yeah.
And then we do a breathing. So we breathe in with your nose. Hold your breath for a little while, and then breathe out. And then again, you breathe in and breathe out. And then we repeat. So we do it twice, and we call it washing and rinsing. It is like one time when we had the workshop under a mango tree in Rwanda, there were some women. They were all widows after the genocide. And then they asked our Rwandese colleague, Robert, so saying, why should we do this? It's same, twice. So why do it? And then he would give this comparison. But you wash your clothes. First you wash it with soap, you wring, and then you change water, and then you rinse. And then you wring again, and you put it, up on a line or over a cloth. And then, if you see that there are still some spots, you will wash again, which means, so this whole washing and rinsing and washing again, if there is still a spot, means this. We do it twice. And then if you feel that there's still something that I feel not comfortable with, you do it again. So it's not like 100% rule to do it twice, because if there's still something, you will do it again. As we know, we're
17 years and we still haven't heard of anybody overdosing.
Well, so when I originally had taught my father tapping, about 2 weeks after teaching my father tapping, my mother gave me a call and she said, you need to talk to your father. He's going to bruise himself. So I think we can get a little vigorous in it, but I think that's the only real side effect.
Yeah, exactly.
When people ask what to expect, we say, well, it might calm you down. It might, lower your heartbeat and get, you might measure some lower cortisol and adrenaline. And as a side effect, you might resolve a 20-year-old trauma.
Yeah,
as a bonus.
And I think that's the other thing that's really valuable is like not overselling an outcome, but just starting at a place of we're going to do this easily, and like you're going to feel better at the end of this. And just knowing that we're going to feel a little bit better is such a huge thing inside of all of this. Is like relief is not an all or nothing proposition, but it's something that, like, when we recognize small bits of it. The other thing I think is really important, like going through the instruction, I see this a lot with my students, just because they're in a circumstance where they want to be really good at stuff.
Breathe in. Hold. And breathe out.
Is they want to get it exactly right. And I appreciate people wanting to get it right. Yeah. And I will never forget, we were working with the medical aid workers in northern Rwanda on the Congo border. And Gunilla, you had taught something, not this, but you had taught a different something. And you had one of the women come forward and lead the group. And as she was doing it, she did it differently than the way you had just taught it. The rhythm had changed a little bit because there's so much dance and there's so much movement. And you turned to me and you said, "Oh, I guess that's the way we do it here." And so it wasn't like she was doing it wrong and she wasn't doing what I taught her, but instead she had taken what I had taught her and did what was natural to her in that particular process. And I think that when we're doing transformation, like for me, the most important question is, how is it working for you?
Yeah.
And if it's working for you, great. Then we keep doing that thing. And if it's not, we try something different. And to just recognize how gentle the tapping like whatever version of the tapping protocol that you're using, they're really forgiving and they're really gentle. And as long as we're getting close, as long as we're hitting points, as long as we're taking deep breaths, as long as we are present to what is going on in the body that we're doing that, we're going to get better. Now, there are degrees of better, and there's like, we can have expectations about transformation. But again, as we were doing that, Ulf, the way that you were setting up, it's like, you're going to feel a little better at the end of this. And you might, and just slowly building on what's possible. I mean, years ago, I was working with a client who literally was only talking to me because her husband was hectoring her to talk to me. And she was just going to do some tapping to shut her husband up. So she was not the most willing participant. And 15 minutes into it, she was disappointed that a single round of tapping did not clear this deep lifelong trauma. Like in 15 minutes, she had gone from being resistant to having super high expectations of it. And I think it's really important that when we're doing this, that we're like constantly doing expectation management and recognizing the value of incremental change and not getting too ahead of ourselves in the process, knowing that it's going to unfold in a way that's natural in the healing process. And the way that you all share this, like, makes it so much easier for us not to have unrealistic expectations about the transformation. And I think that's a real asset and value, because people, when it's meeting our expectations, we're much more willing to continue doing it. If I'm getting great results, but I have higher expectations, I'm going to be disappointed and I'm going to walk away. And I think it's a really valuable lesson in the way that you share that.
I'd like to add something to that. I mean, in our book, we have like, I don't know if it's 18 or 20 different psychosensory or somatic interventions, or if you want to call it energy psychology, whatever you want to call it, but using the body to change the nervous system of the mammal and thus the mind and the emotions. And by having more than one method, our two hero methods are the trauma tapping. We also use self-havening a lot. We also use do-in, Japanese self-massage. We use head holding. We use breathing. But when you come with more than one, it doesn't become a cell. It's not, this is a product I want you to have. This is the only thing that works. And it also doesn't become a religion. This has to work or you've failed. It becomes, try these. You know, like you were saying just a few seconds ago, here, try this. If it doesn't work, let's try another one. And we find that when we tell people, you know, let's try a method, let's try two methods, and you tell us which one gives you the most relief. All of a sudden, we have a hypnotic double bind. One of them will work better than the other, and they're agreeing to helping us rather than us helping them. Wow, that's cool. And then they're noticing the difference. Wow, they're going into themselves and engaging interoception and association in the body. So that is actually a part of it. I would say the techniques is actually, it's an important part, but not the vital part. In our manifesto, we say, learn, master the technique and learn the rest, which is the clean approach and not assuming things and having local leaders lead it and not being invested in outcome. All these things we said and that you said.
And the other word that I want to highlight that you shared in that was the word notice. And I love at the end of a round of tapping to ask someone, what did you notice? Because the word notice, it's like I know, at least in my practice, occasionally I have what I call performative clienting, where the clients are trying to act in a way to make me feel good as a practitioner. Like they're kind of on entertainment, trying to, like, you know, I made my therapist laugh today. I did a good job. And it's possible that we can ask questions in a way that they're going to give us an answer that they think we want to hear, not the answer about their particular experience. And the word you use there, notice, is so perfect, because there's There is no guiding or leading the witness. There is no looking for something in particular. It's literally just report on your experience. What did you notice? And then I can ask follow-up questions. If they go to the negative, I can ask about the positive. If they go to the positive, I can ask, what are the tail enders that are still hanging out? But I'm doing it in a way where, again, they're the one that is in charge of their experience. And I'm just being curious and continuing to add into that. And I think that that also makes what you do so effective, is because we're allowing them to be in the driver's seat of the process.
And for those of you that want to go deep in that, I would say that's all in line with the clean language teaching and clean approach of David Grove, because it's about reflecting their reality, helping them into a safe space, and allowing them to explore that and find the solution for whatever's there.
And as we navigate our way through this entire day, know that all of the resources the various speakers are going to be talking about, we're going to be collating all of those. And so you guys are going to get an email from us when we start sending you replays and stuff like that. So as we're going through and our amazing speakers are sharing these resources, you're going to have a lovely catalog of places to go investigate to find the tools that serve you as you continue forward. So I have one last question. I have one last question for you guys before we move on. And that is, what is something you have changed your mind about as you have worked through all of this over the course of time? And it could be an approach, it could be an assumption, it could be something about yourself. What is something that you used to think one way and you now think, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, but I'm just kind of curious, like, where has been the leading edge for you two as you've navigated your way through this?
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, for me, I think it is, my mind directly goes then to what I call my best learnings, life skills, or that I have learned in Rwanda and Eastern Congo, which have been the places where I've done. And that is much more gratitude for anything. So I would say that is my biggest, and that I am so grateful for having learned gratitude for, because it is like, I mean, you saw it also. I mean, when we come somewhere, people, they would, receive us, and especially, of course, Placid or Calixte or whoever we're working with, or Germando, but still, it is a gratitude of just that, and perhaps in my own is not the one that comes before, because we expect to get a lot. So I mean, learning gratitude, I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. What about you, Ulf?
Kind of overlapping, I would say. There's a huge gratitude in. I'm eternally thankful to Gunilla, because if I hadn't met her, I wouldn't have had a chance to do this. And this is meaningful. There's a gratitude for the opportunity to help somebody, but also a gratitude that every single person we meet, all these amazing people that we collaborate with, the Peaceful Heart Network, like Gunilla was mentioning, Germando, Calixte, John, Placid, all these people, Robert, they teach us so much all the time. So it's a gratitude for being on a road where we are learning as we go along, and on the way, hopefully we're helping somebody to help somebody as well. It's a win-win-win-win.
Awesome. And for everybody who's watching along, and for those of you who participated last year, the really cool thing about this particular work, we were sitting in the north of Uganda. We were working with a bunch of medical aid workers, and we're doing the presentation, and Gunillas teaching something, and Ulf just kind of taps me on the leg and leans over and goes, "You guys paid for this." And to know that, like, to see this global community firsthand transforming people's lives on the edge of a war-torn country, 50 meters from a UN aid station, like, it just is so amazing. And so the joke was, while I was writing everything, was Tier Tally. We're going to be running one of those over the course of the next 24 hours because I'm a soft touch. I just, like, you two have no clue how much, like, You've woven your way into our hearts, and the work that you do is making such a difference. And in addition to the work that you do, the way that you do it so thoughtfully and deliberately and humbly from a place of service, I've seen so much kind-hearted incompetence in this world where people are motivated by the right thing and show up in the absolute wrong way. And to see firsthand the amazing work and the way that you just tread so gently as you walk into these communities with an open heart, just trying to find a way to connect so that they can create transformation in their lives. Like I said, we were having lunch one day in Rwanda, and I just turned to both of you and I said, "You're stuck with us." And that is truly the case. And so I want to thank you for your time today. I want to thank you for your amazing work. As the next 24 hours unfold, we're going to be sharing with you guys lots and lots of ways where we're going to be doing a bunch of other events and mentoring so that you can go deeper and you can become more skilled with TTT. We're going to be creating opportunities to do office hours where you're going to be able to ask Ulf and Gunilla questions about your experience and how you can get better at this and all of this sort of stuff. This is not something that is just happening these 24 hours. This is not you just investing in their work. This is an opportunity for everybody who is joining with us, the opportunity to become helpers wherever you are in the world, because everywhere we are in the world, there are folks who could use a very gentle, kind-hearted tap where they are. And so we want to make sure that as you support this amazing work, know that we're creating opportunities so we can support you, so you can share this everywhere. So once again, you two, I just love you so much, and thanks for your time and thanks for your amazing work.
Yeah,
Right
thank
back
you
at
so
you.
much. And thanks you so much for joining us, because that was really, as I said there, a dream coming true to have this very professional eyes and big heart of you and Elaine, your sister, and to see what we're doing, because it's not easy to describe it yourself, because you know it's from inside, it feels awkward to tell. But when somebody like you sees it and can tell, others, thank you so much.
And
we will
thank you
be
to
sharing with
everybody being a part of this, everybody, all the speakers, anybody listening in. We are eternally grateful to you, because you're actually spending time, taking part of this, being a part, learning it. If you learn it, if you pass it on, if you contribute to it, anything you do will help somebody. And that's an amazing thing.
Awesome. Thank you much, guys. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.